Okay, we're gonna try this again. I've tried to make this video now 4 times. We're just going with it. It's just gonna happen. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update. I am on day 3 of my trip, but I actually just got done with day 1 of research this trip. This is actually the 3rd trip that I've made to research painted and printed textiles. And if you have followed my travels either on Facebook or on YouTube or a combination thereof, you know that I have previously visited the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, or LACMA, the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, and the Cleveland Museum of Art. This trip, I was scheduled to go to the Brooklyn Museum, Dumbarton Oaks Museum, the Textile Museum, and the Rhode Island School of Design Museum. There was a change in plans that I want to explain now. I debated as to whether or not I should even talk about this on this video. However, since you guys have all sort of come along with me on this journey, I'm going to share what happened that altered this trip, and also why I have been a little bit cryptic and a little bit kind of MIA for the last little bit. So I was supposed to leave for this trip last Tuesday. Today is Tuesday, so a week ago today. I was going to travel most of the way on Tuesday, then the rest of the way on Wednesday, and then on Thursday and Friday of last week, I was supposed to be at the Brooklyn Museum. On Tuesday morning, while I was running errands, getting ready to leave for my trip, I got a phone call from my dad. My mom has had a long-term chronic and terminal illness, and he said, Tanya, it does not look good. It does not look like she is probably going to make it past the weekend. If you can get here, get here. Mom did not want me to call you and tell you. She specifically forbid me to because she knew about your trip and she didn't want you to miss your trip. But I thought you should know. And I said, yeah, Dad, this is kind of a no-brainer. So I immediately went home from errands, grabbed all the stuff that I already packed for this trip, and grabbed my son. He grabbed some clothes, and then we went from Dayton to Detroit. When I got to Detroit, my mom was in a pretty bad state. She did not initially recognize me. Her eyes kept rolling in the back of her head. She was not looking good. So my dad was right to call me. Variety of other symptoms that were present that I'm not going to go into, but it was clear that she did not have long. So I started talking to my mom, and she didn't recognize me right away. Like, she kept kind of looking at me, and then her eyes kept rolling in the back of her head, like she was trying to fall back asleep. And my dad said something, and she immediately kind of alerted to my dad's voice. And then he was talking to her, and he kind of motioned down to me while he was talking to her. And she looked from him to me, and then realized and recognized that I was there. And she immediately started crying. And I started crying. And she was like, she wasn't actually able to talk out loud at that point, and she just kind of mouthed and barely whispered, "You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be on your trip." And I said, "Mom, there's nowhere else I would rather be. This is not even a discussion. It can wait." So I did end up canceling the first leg of this trip with Brooklyn Museum. They have been extremely understanding and gracious and have agreed to reschedule at some point in the future. The good news is that at some point I'm supposed to go to the Met Museum, so maybe I'll just make it a double whammy New York trip. I also have a 3rd New York museum that I'm still trying to break into, figuratively, not literally. So maybe it'll be a three for one. We'll see. Anyways, I spent the week, most of the week, with my mom and dad, and my sister ended up coming up as well. She within an hour of me. So my parents, only 2 children, and then my son happened to be with me. It's their first grandchild. My sister and I stayed through Saturday. My mom repeatedly throughout the days that I was there had gained enough strength to articulate herself and said, "You're going on this trip. You need to go on this trip. Whether I'm here or whether I'm not, you need to go on this trip, at least the next leg." I said, "Mom, we'll see. And then we had a conversation, and she made it very clear that that was her wishes. So if you're like, hey, Tanya, you're a jerk for leaving your mother in such a state. It was her distinct and explicit wishes that I go. And so I did. I left on Saturday evening, got home, left first thing Sunday morning for Washington, D.C., got here late at night. And then Monday I prepped and did some work. And then today, Tuesday, was my first day of research. And as I was getting ready in the morning, I got a call from my dad that my mom passed away this morning. And so I said, okay, we kind of knew that was coming. And so today was very bittersweet and very much a struggle for me because, of course, this is the trip of a lifetime. It's my dream. It has significant implications for people that are interested in this arena. And all I wanted to do was be at home. And wow, what a mixture of things, right? I want to be here, but I also want to be with my dad and my family right now. But every time I started to tear up a little bit, which, it's not good to cry on 1,000-plus-year-old textiles, I just kept thinking, my mom would not have otherwise been able to be here with me to watch this, and now she gets to watch. So there's the solace. I'm sorry if this was heavy and not what you were hoping to see. We'll get to the fun and exciting stuff, but I wanted to explain kind of what happened, why parts of my trip are missing, what's going to happen with that, what the reasoning was, and then why I came. Not that any of you, I don't care what you think. I know what my mom wanted, but anyways. So, done with the crying, the sad crying. Maybe some happy crying is coming. So I got to Dumbarton Oaks today. The interesting thing about Dumbarton Oaks, I was trying to figure out, why is Dumbarton Oaks, which is an extension of Harvard Museum or Harvard University, why is it part of, or why is it in Washington, D.C.? And Harvard's in Massachusetts. So I did some research and I found out that Dumbarton Oaks, the house and the land that it was actually owned by a very rich couple from the 1920s to the 1950s. And then when they passed away, it was their distinct wishes and they left it to Harvard University, as well as their collection of artifacts, including textiles, for the purposes of advancing research and scholarship in a variety of fields, including the humanities, but in particular in Byzantine studies as well as pre-Columbian studies. And so that is how and why there's a Harvard Museum in Washington, D.C. that's kind of a standalone thing, but definitely operated by the Board of Governors at Harvard University. So I got there and I had requested to see and study 12 textiles, but one of the textiles is actually at Harvard Arts Museum's exhibit that just launched in the last 2 weeks that I am scheduled to go see. I've already got my tickets on reserve when I go up to Rhode Island, because Harvard is only 45 minutes from Providence, Rhode Island. So I'm just going to go one of the Sundays that I'm there and see that exhibit, which is an exhibit on terraz bands, but in particular, sort of the inscriptions. And they have both embroidered, woven, as well as gilded and block printed terraz bands. So that's the reason I'm going to go see, because, it's got something I'm interested in. So 11 textiles. I get there and the registrar and collections manager greets me. That was my main point of contact. And we go to the room, and it's this big, wonderful, big open room with lots and lots of drawers, of course, and that was their textile storage. And so the way this kind of works is that most of the time when you go to these museums, there's always somebody that's in the room or the next room, basically line of sight, or at least can hear you, And they basically take shifts if it's more than one person in sort of watching over you, babysitting, I call it. And I don't mean that at all in a nasty or negative way, but basically they want to make sure if you have any questions, they can answer the questions. If you need to handle or manipulate the textiles in any way, they do so, and they do so safely according to their handling guidelines. They can point you to other textiles that might exist in the storage facility that you are unaware of. Which has happened more than once, including on this trip. And just basically make sure you don't walk off with part of their part or all of their textiles, for insurance liability. So she was in there for about an hour and a half, and was trucking through the things. And then she said, okay, the next person coming in is the curator of the pre-Columbian studies. So you might want to switch to the pre-Columbian one that you have identified, because he can, be a great resource. I said, yeah, absolutely, great. So he came in and we started talking. And of course, he asks that question, which I've heard a couple other times. Well, why didn't you ask for these other ones? I'm like, well, I didn't know about the other ones, because when I searched your database for painted or printed or gilded or whatever textiles pre-Columbian, this is the only one that came up in your search collection. And this is why it's so important to talk to these curators, because most of the time they are familiar with other ones in their collection or ones that are popularly asked for. So he said, yeah, actually, we have like 3 or 4 others. Let's pull them out. So we added 3 or 4 others to my group of textiles that I studied today. He told me a really fascinating story about how one of the textiles came to be at Dumbarton Oaks. It was donated in the 1950s or 60s by a gentleman who was a private collector who happened to be down in Peru. And while he was in Peru, he went to go see somebody to buy something. It was like one of those guys like, yeah, if you need anything, this guy has it, right? So he's in that guy's hotel room. And he hears some water running, and the private collector says to the salesman, what's going on? Do you have to go stop the water? What's happening here? And he said, oh, I'm just getting ready to wash some fabrics. And he points over to the corner, and in the corner is like this balled up, old, very, very old looking textile. It has some kind of paintings or drawings or whatever on it. And so the collector had the wherewithal to say, how about I save you the work, and I'll just give you everything I have on me for that textile. So he purchased the textile, I think, for a couple $100. Not sure. This is the 1950s and 60s. I don't know how much that guy had on him, but he purchased it for whatever he did have upon himself, and took it back home and recognized that it was going to need significant work. So he got it to a textile conservator who took 1.5 years, and this is not unusual, to gently get it to the point where it could be reopened. What often happens in those situations is you have to actually rehydrate and humidify the fibers themselves so that as you open, they don't crack. They can have enough sort of elasticity and spring to them and suppleness or moisture to them that they can actually open up. So it took them 1.5 years to like open it up, put all the fragments together, because there's definitely some loose parts, and then mount it to another textile so that it could actually be presented. And then that gentleman, the private collector, then donated it to Dumbarton Oaks Museum. A fun postscript to that story is the gentleman who's the curator, his professor of archaeology down in the university they went to in Peru, recently contacted him and said, hey, you know that hole that's in the middle of that textile? I found the missing piece. So he was on another excavation somewhere else and found it. Turns out that the private collector that bought it got the name of the city that the salesman in the hotel room told him it was from wrong, got it off by a letter, an O instead of an A. And then the archaeology professor was in the right city, the O instead of the A. And that's where they found it. So long, interesting story of like small world, people, things coming together. It's cool to hear those kinds of stories. So I got to study 3 or 4 extra pieces that I was not expecting, which is exciting. And then when his shift was done, his babysitting shift was done, he passed me off to the curator of Byzantine collection. And she and I talked about several of the pieces. She and I agreed on the dating on a couple of them because there's pretty wide spans on some of them. We both think this and we both think this on that one. And then one came up and we were both like, yeah, this one's way, way more recent. It's probably 17th century. And we talked about what we did like about it, what we didn't like about it, what some of the tells are, how you can tell if it's a little bit more recent, and some of the weird choices, aesthetic choices that were made by the person that printed it. And so you kind of like, what were they thinking? What was the purpose? Why would they do this? It was very, very interesting. And then something very interesting happened with a different textile. It was an Indian. It's from the, we think, from the Indian subcontinent. And as I'm looking at it, I discovered that there is something present there that shouldn't be, that makes no functional or design sense. And so I point this out to her and she goes, yeah, that's kind of weird. Sometimes I've seen that under certain conditions, X, Y, Z. So then we looked for those conditions and we're like, no, we can cross all those out except for one, maybe. But then when I pointed something else about this out, and I'm kind of being vague here because we have a mystery we've got to solve. So I will put up a second video once I have permissions achieved, because I have to get permissions to post my pictures on anything. So once I get those permissions achieved, then I can post these pictures and I'll explain it a little bit better. So we're like, okay, it's kind of a mystery. Maybe this other condition existed. Maybe it didn't. We don't know, whatever. So she goes back to work and I'm, further looking at this under the microscope. And then I see another similar thing happening along the weft. The initial thing was along the warp. And now we're both totally perplexed, like neither one of us. And so we had this moment where she's over and I'm over and we're looking at the microscope and we're looking at it together. And she's like, well, what about this? And what about that? And we're both like, I don't know, man, this is the weirdest thing. I have looked at 75 to 100 painted, printed, gilded, stamped textiles. I'm sure she's seen more in her day. And neither one of us has ever seen this on any textile. So a little teaser there. You guys will get some pictures probably maybe after this weekend if I have some time while I'm traveling or once I get to Rhode Island. So that was very exciting. Had some great, talk and shop. I had the funny question of, so what field are you in? Archaeology or textile conservatorship? Or no, I'm just a housewife from suburbia that happens to be a huge enthusiast. The curator of business or pre-Columbian textiles was like very excited actually that I didn't have any background. And he said, you need to meet my friend. He's like the same as you. You guys are like soulmates. And I said, okay, you'll have to introduce us. So overall, it was a very good day, despite the bittersweet beginning and prelude to it. It was nice to have my mom along with me on day one of my research. I can't wait to show you some pictures. And as I mentioned, once I get those permissions granted to show those pictures, I will do so. And they will be uploaded probably both to Facebook as well as printedtextilesproject.com. That website is currently under construction. So exciting day. Mostly good day. I'm going to say it was a good day. It was a good day. So that was day one of research, but day 3 of the trip. I will keep you posted. I will attempt, but do not promise, to do a vlog every single day. If you don't want to listen to me blather on and talk about things, don't watch. Otherwise, I will tell you a little bit about everything that was going on, cool things that I learned. I can't wait to show you this weird mystery. It makes no sense. I'm fascinated. I'm already like formulating ideas and reasons and theories and a paper, but I feel like I got to do so much more research on this one. So, and I have other papers I got to write first. You guys got to yell at me. I have 2 papers to present that I need to get on top of. So that is that. That is the update. Thanks for sticking by. Tomorrow, I go to the Textile Museum, which is an extension of George Washington University. I will be there for 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I am looking at 36, I think the number is 36 textiles from all over. Pre-Columbian, European, medieval, early Renaissance, including one that I think is a Ferrer fake. We will see. Japanese, Chinese, Egyptian, Indian, maybe Italian. So a whole mishmash of things that I can't wait to tell you guys all about. So I think that's it. If I forgot anything, then I will tell you tomorrow. All right. Bye.